Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The smell of industrial disinfectant always clung to my scrubs, no matter how many times I washed them. It was the scent of St. Catherine's Elementary, where I'd been the school nurse for 3 years. 3 years of scraped knees, fevers, and the occasional playground drama. The pay was terrible, but I needed the stability after my life had fallen apart. Besides, the children needed someone who cared. That Tuesday in October started like any other. The thermometer giving false readings, my ancient office computer freezing twice, and the constant parade of students with stomach aches that mysteriously coincided with math tests. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and sighed, watching the rain tap against my office window. The small nurses' station felt even more cramped than usual, with its single examination bed, metal desk, and wall of outdated medical posters. Miss Harper? Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the third-grade teachers, appeared in my doorway, her usually composed face tight with concern. "You need to come. Now." Something in her voice made my stomach drop. I grabbed my emergency kit and followed her quick footsteps down the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Children pressed their faces against classroom windows as we rushed past. "What happened?" I asked, struggling to keep up. "The new boy," she said over her shoulder, "collapsed during recess, not responding well." My mind raced through protocols as we burst through the double doors to the playground. A small crowd of teachers had formed a protective circle around someone, on the ground. The children had been moved inside, but I could see their wide eyes watching from classroom windows. "Move back, please," I said, my voice steadier than my hands as I knelt beside the small figure on the asphalt. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. Dark hair, expensive clothes that seemed at odds with our underfunded public school. His skin was pale, with a bluish tint around his lips that made my heart rate quicken. I checked his pulse, rapid but present, and placed my stethoscope against his chest. "Has anyone called 911?" I asked, not looking up. "Lines are down from the storm," the PE teacher said. "Cell service, too. Rodriguez is trying the landline in the office." I nodded, focusing on the child. His breathing was shallow, his small body radiating heat. Fever, possible seizure, signs of... "What's his name?" I asked, reaching for the cold compress in my kit. "Matteo," someone said. "Matteo Russo. Started last week." My hands froze for just a fraction of a second. Russo. Even in my modest corner of the city, that name carried weight. Whispers. Warnings. "Does he have any medical conditions? Allergies?" I asked, pushing aside the thought. The teachers exchanged glances. "His paperwork just says to call his father if anything happens. No mother listed." I placed the compress on his forehead, checking his pupils. They were responsive, which was a good sign. "I need his emergency contact information. Now." Mrs. Rodriguez handed me a file. The emergency contact form was sparse. Just a name and a phone number. No alternative contacts, no medical history. Antonio Russo. The weight of the name settled in my stomach like a stone. Everyone in the city knew of the Russo family, even if most had never seen them. They owned half the waterfront, countless businesses, and according to rumors, most of the police force. Antonio Russo had taken control 5 years ago after his father's retirement, and the streets had run red for months afterward. And now his son was unconscious on my playground. "Ambulance is still 20 minutes out," Mrs. Rodriguez said, returning from the office. Storm knocked down power lines on Westbrook. I looked down at the boy, his eyelids fluttering. His condition was stabilizing, but he needed proper medical attention. I couldn't wait 20 minutes. "I'm calling his father," I said, pulling out my cell phone. The teachers exchanged nervous glances. "Are you sure that's—" "He needs to know," I said firmly, though my finger trembled as I dialed, "and we need help now." The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Who is this number?" His accent was slight, the voice low and controlled in a way that sent a chill through me. "Mr. Russo? This is Emma Harper, the nurse at St. Catherine's Elementary." I struggled to keep my voice professional. "I'm calling about your son, Matteo. He collapsed during recess. He's stable. But what happened to my son?" The voice had changed. a dangerous edge replacing the initial control. He fainted, sir. He has a high fever, and there might have been a seizure. The ambulance is delayed because of the storm, but he needs address. Not a question, a command. I gave him the school's address, adding, "He's in the nurses' station now. We're on Brighton Street. The north entrance would be..." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment before turning my attention back to Mateo. His color was improving, but his breathing remained shallow. I had moved him to my office, the small examination bed making him look even tinier. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. 12 minutes later, I heard it. The sound of screeching tires in the parking lot, followed by car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, and the atmosphere in the school seemed to shift, as if the building itself were holding its breath. My office door burst open. The man who filled the doorframe seemed to absorb all the oxygen in the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary. His dark hair was cut close on the sides, longer on top, with silver threads at the temples that only enhanced his authority. A thin scar traced his left jawline, disappearing into the collar of his shirt, but it was his eyes that froze me in place. Dark, calculating, and right now, filled with barely contained fury. Behind him stood two men in similar suits, their stances wide, hands hidden beneath their jackets in a way that left little doubt about what they were carrying. Antonio Russo's gaze swept past me to the small figure on the bed. "Matteo," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he moved to his son's side. I found my professional voice again. "His fever is 103.2. He was unconscious for approximately 3 minutes. I've administered basic first aid, but he needs..." "You're the nurse who called?" His eyes locked onto mine, assessing, measuring. I nodded, suddenly aware of my faded scrubs, the coffee stain on my sleeve, the messy bun I'd hastily put up that morning. Emma Harper. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps? But that was impossible. Men like Antonio Russo didn't know women like me. "The hospital is sending an ambulance, but with the storm," I began. "No hospital." His tone left no room for argument. "My doctor is waiting at my home. We'll take him now." I blinked, professional concern overriding my fear. "Mr. Russo, with all due respect, your son needs proper medical..." "My son," he said, each word precise, "will receive the best care in the city, from doctors who value their lives." His eyes never left mine. "You're coming with us." It wasn't a request. I can't just leave," I stammered, looking around at my small office, the school beyond. "I have responsibilities here. Other children..." "It's fine, Emma," Mrs. Rodriguez said from the doorway, her face pale. "We'll call in a substitute. Go with them." The please was silent but understood. One of Russo's men was already gathering Matteo into his arms with surprising gentleness. The boy stirred slightly, but didn't wake. "My car," I began. "Will be delivered to you," Russo said, his hand suddenly at the small of my back, guiding me forward, not forceful, but undeniable. Heat radiated through my thin scrubs. "Bring whatever medical supplies you need." I grabbed my bag on autopilot, my mind racing through options that didn't exist. The rational part of me knew I should refuse, call the police, maintain professional boundaries. But the police wouldn't come, not against the Russos, and something in Matteo's small face, so vulnerable in unconsciousness, made the decision for me. The hallway parted before us like the Red Sea. Teachers and administrative staff pressed against walls, eyes downcast. Outside, 3 black SUVs waited, engines running. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle, the air heavy with the smell of wet asphalt. Russo's hand remained at my back as he guided me to the middle vehicle. The man carrying Matteo placed him gently in the back seat, arranging him on the leather with care. I climbed in beside the boy, medical instincts taking over as I checked his pulse again. Russo slid in on the other side of his son, his large frame making the spacious SUV feel suddenly cramped. The doors closed with soft, expensive thuds, sealing us in a cocoon of leather and silence. "Drive," he said to the man behind the wheel, and then his attention turned fully to me. Now tell me exactly what happened to my son. As the school disappeared behind us, I realized my simple life had just veered drastically off course. One phone call, one decision. And now I was trapped in a moving vehicle with the most dangerous man in the city, his unconscious son between us. I had no idea that this was only the beginning, that this moment would be the dividing line in my life, before Antonio Russo and after. He was playing normally during recess when he suddenly collapsed, I explained, keeping my voice steady despite the intensity of Antonio Russo's gaze. No visible injuries, but his temperature was dangerously high. Has Matteo been sick recently? Any symptoms before today? Something shifted in Russo's expression. A momentary vulnerability quickly masked by control. No. He was fine this morning. The car moved swiftly through traffic, other vehicles pulling aside as if sensing who was inside. Through the tinted windows, I watched the city transform, crumbling apartment buildings giving way to upscale shops, then to gated mansions as we headed toward the hills overlooking the bay. May I ask what medical conditions Matteo has? I pressed, professional concern overriding my fear. His school records are incomplete. Russo's jaw tightened. He had pneumonia as an infant. Respiratory issues since then. Nothing for 3 years. His large hand gently brushed hair from Matteo's forehead, the tenderness of the gesture at odds with everything I'd heard about this man. His doctor will tell you everything when we arrive. The boy stirred under my touch as I checked his pulse again. His eyelids fluttered, and a small moan escaped his lips. Papa? Relief flooded Russo's face, a glimpse behind the mask. I'm here, Piccolo Leone. You're safe. Matteo's eyes opened fully, confusion giving way to recognition when he saw his father. Then his gaze shifted to me, wariness replacing confusion. This is Miss Harper, Russo explained. The nurse from your school. She's helping you. The boy studied me with dark eyes that mirrored his father's, too knowing for a child. My head hurts, he whispered. I know, sweetheart, I said, slipping into the gentle tone I used with all my young patients. We're taking you somewhere to make you feel better. I took a small penlight from my bag. Can I check your eyes? He nodded, wincing as the light hit his pupils. They contracted normally. Another good sign. You fainted at school, I explained. Do you remember feeling bad before that happened? Matteo's brow furrowed. My stomach felt weird at breakfast, and I got really hot during math. I nodded, tucking the information away. Did you tell anyone? He glanced at his father, then back to me. I didn't want to go home. We were making volcanoes in science class. The simple childhood concern made something twist in my chest. Despite who his father was, Matteo was just a 7-year-old boy excited about school projects. How are you feeling now? I asked, placing a hand on his forehead. Still too warm, but better. Tired, thirsty. From a hidden compartment, Russo produced a water bottle, unscrewing the cap before handing it to his son. The care in the movement was striking. This man who reportedly ordered killings without blinking, helping his child take small sips of water. The SUV slowed, turning through an imposing gate that seemed to appear from nowhere among the dense trees. Armed men stood guard, nodding respectfully as we passed. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, ending before a mansion that looked more like a fortress disguised as a luxury estate. More men in suits waited outside, their postures alert, despite the seeming calm. One opened the car door as we came to a stop. Dr. Brennan is waiting in the East Wing, he informed Russo, who nodded curtly. I can walk, Papa, Matteo protested as his father moved to lift him. Not today, Piccolo, Russo said firmly, gathering his son into his arms. The boy seemed tiny against his father's broad chest. I followed them into the house, clutching my medical bag like a lifeline. The interior was a study in controlled opulence. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, priceless art on the walls. Everything spoke of old money and dangerous power. We moved through a series of hallways, staff members quickly averting their eyes as we passed. Finally, we entered what appeared to be a fully equipped medical suite, more advanced than many hospital rooms I'd seen. A distinguished older man with silver hair rose from behind a desk. Antonio, he greeted, then immediately focused on Matteo. Let's have a look at our patient. Russo placed his son on the examination table with surprising gentleness. This is Miss Harper, he said to the doctor. The school nurse who called me, Dr. Baum. Brennan gave me a measured look, professional but cautious. Thank you for your quick action. I'll take over now. I should have felt relief at handing over responsibility to a clearly qualified physician, but something kept me rooted in place. His temperature was 103.2 when I last checked, possible seizure activity during the initial collapse, but his vitals have stabilized. The doctor nodded, already examining Matteo with practiced efficiency. I'll need to run some tests. It might be best if she stays, Russo interrupted, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. She handled the initial episode. I want her assessment. Dr. Brennan's expression didn't change, but I sensed his surprise. As you wish. For the next hour, I observed as Matteo underwent a series of tests. Blood drawn, vitals monitored, neurological responses checked. The boy remained brave throughout, only occasionally glancing at his father for reassurance. Russo never left his side, his imposing presence somehow both threatening and comforting. I believe it's a viral infection that's triggered a febrile seizure, Dr. Brennan finally concluded. Not uncommon in children, but with Matteo's history of respiratory issues, we'll need to monitor him closely. He turned to Russo. He should rest for at least 48 hours. I'll start him on antivirals as a precaution. Russo nodded once, his relief visible only in the slight loosening of his shoulders. Prepare the medication and have Rosa bring up something for him to eat. As Dr. Brennan moved to a cabinet of pharmaceuticals, Russo turned to me. Your assessment? The direct question caught me off guard. I agree with Dr. Brennan. Febrile seizures can be frightening but are rarely dangerous on their own. The viral infection is the concern, especially with Matteo's history. I glanced at the boy, who was watching our exchange with tired eyes. His quick recovery is a good sign, but he'll need rest and monitoring. Something like approval flickered across Russo's face. He checked his watch, a timepiece that probably cost more than my car, and spoke to one of his men who had remained silently by the door. Have Marco bring Miss Harper's car here, and tell Sophia to prepare the blue guest room. My heart stuttered. Guest room? Mr. Russo, I appreciate your concern, but I should really get home, now that Matteo is in good hands. It's not a request, he said, his voice quiet but unyielding. The storm is getting worse. Roads will be flooded by nightfall. He gestured toward a wall of windows, where I could see dark clouds gathering over the bay. Besides, my son might need you. Papa, Matteo said sleepily from the examination table. Can Miss Harper read me a story later, like the nurses did when I was at the big hospital? The naked hope in the child's voice made refusal impossible. I remembered his school file. No mother listed, just a powerful, feared father and what must be an army of staff. Of course, I said softly. If it's all right with your father. Russo's dark eyes held mine for a long moment, assessing. It's decided then. You'll stay until Matteo is recovered. Until Matteo is recovered, not overnight. Not until the storm passes. The open-ended nature of his statement sent a chill down my spine. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared at the door. The blue room is ready, sir. Show Miss Harper where she can freshen up, Russo instructed her. And find her something suitable to wear. I looked down at my rumpled scrubs, suddenly conscious of how out of place I must appear in this pristine environment. My clothes are fine, really. You'll be more comfortable in something else, he said, making it sound reasonable rather than controlling. Sophia will help you. Sophia gave me a small, encouraging smile. This way, please, Miss Harper. With one last glance at Matteo, who had finally fallen into a peaceful sleep under his father's watchful gaze, I followed Sophia out of the medical suite and back through the labyrinthine hallways. Mr. Russo is very protective of Matteo, Sophia said softly as we walked. We rarely see him bring anyone to the house, especially a woman. The implication in her tone made me uncomfortable. I'm just here as a medical professional, I clarified quickly, to help with Matteo's recovery. Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Miss Harper. The blue room turned out to be a guest suite larger than my entire apartment, decorated in shades of azure and cream. A balcony overlooked the turbulent waters of the bay, where the promised storm was rolling in, lightning occasionally illuminating the darkening sky. "The bathroom is through there," Sophia indicated a door. "Fresh towels are laid out. I'll bring you some clothes shortly." She paused at the doorway. "If I may, Miss Harper, Mr. Russo doesn't trust easily. Whatever you did to earn that trust, it's unusual." Before I could respond, she was gone, closing the heavy door behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded final. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with me. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone to call the school, only to find no signal, of course. I was completely cut off, in the fortress of a man known for making people disappear. The bathroom was a marble sanctuary, with a shower large enough for 5 people and a soaking tub beside floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood under the hot water, trying to wash away the sense of unreality that clung to me. What had I gotten myself into, and more importantly, how would I get out? When I emerged, wrapped in a plush robe that felt like clouds against my skin, Sophia had returned. Laid out on the bed were several options: casual wear, sleepwear, and a simple blue dress that looked approximately my size. "Mr. Russo requests your presence for dinner once you're settled," Sophia said. "Just Matteo, him, and you, in the small dining room." My stomach clenched. How was Matteo doing? Resting comfortably. Dr. Brennan says his fever is already reducing. She glanced at the clothes. "Will these be sufficient?" I nodded mutely, unsure what else to say. As she turned to leave, a question burst from me. "Sophia? What happened to Matteo's mother?" She froze, her hand on the doorknob. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We don't ask those questions in this house, Miss Harper. Not ever." With that, she was gone. I dressed in the simple blue dress, which fit surprisingly well. My reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Clean, polished, but with eyes wide with uncertainty. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows. No chance of leaving now, even if Russo would allow it. A soft knock at the door made me jump. One of Russo's men stood outside, his expression neutral. "Mr. Russo is waiting. I'll escort you." As I followed him through the sprawling mansion, I tried to memorize the route, an instinctive response to feeling trapped. We passed rooms filled with antiques, others with cutting-edge technology, and still others whose doors remained firmly closed. The contrast between old-world wealth and modern security was jarring. The small dining room was still larger than most restaurants, though only one corner was set with 3 places. Matteo was already there, dressed in fresh pajamas, color returned to his cheeks. He brightened when he saw me. "Miss Harper, Papa said you're staying to make sure I get better." Before I could respond, Antonio Russo emerged from a side door. He had changed into a black sweater and tailored pants that somehow made him look even more formidable. His eyes tracked my movement as I approached the table, lingering in a way that made my skin warm despite my apprehension. "You look rested," he observed, pulling out my chair. "The blue suits you." As I took my seat, lightning flashed across the sky outside, illuminating his face for a brief second. In that flash, I saw something in his expression that made my breath catch. Hunger, calculation, and something else I couldn't name. The storm had trapped me here, but I was beginning to fear it wasn't the weather I should be worried about. Dinner was a surreal experience. Crystal glasses, silver service, and a private chef preparing meals tailored to each of us. Simple chicken soup for Matteo, perfectly seared steak for Russo, and a delicate pasta primavera for me that somehow matched exactly what I would have chosen for myself. "Do you like it?" Matteo asked earnestly, watching me take my first bite. "It's delicious," I answered truthfully, wondering how many school nurses had dined at the Russo table before me. I suspected the answer was 0. "Chef Paolo trained in Florence," Russo said, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "He makes Matteo's favorite zuppa, just like my mother used to make." The mention of family seemed to energize Matteo despite his illness. "Papa's mama was the best cook in all of Sicily. She taught Paolo all the secret recipes before she died." Russo's expression softened when looking at his son, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the infamous reputation. "That's right, Piccolo. And someday you'll learn them too." I watched their interaction with fascination. The feared Mafia boss was, by all appearances, a devoted father. The contradiction was difficult to reconcile. "Miss Harper, Matteo said, turning those intelligent dark eyes to me. Do you have kids? The innocent question pierced something tender inside me. No, I don't. But you're so good with kids at school. That's what Mrs. Rodriguez told me. I smiled, touched by the compliment. I love working with children. It's why I became a school nurse. Instead of a real nurse? Matteo asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. I mean, it's all right, I assured him. I was a real nurse before, at a hospital. But I prefer working at schools now. Russo's gaze sharpened. Why the change? There it was, the direct question that probed at wounds still raw after 3 years. I took a sip of water, buying time. Sometimes we need different environments to grow, I said finally, the half-truth sticking in my throat. Hospital work is intense. Something in Russo's expression told me he recognized the evasion but wouldn't push. Not yet, anyway. Miss Harper was married, Matteo announced suddenly, pointing to the faint tan line on my left hand where my wedding ring had been until 6 months ago. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The child's observational skills were unnervingly sharp. Matteo, his father admonished softly, it's impolite to comment on personal matters. Sorry, the boy mumbled, looking genuinely contrite. It's okay, I said, setting down my fork. Yes, I was married, not anymore. Russo studied me over the rim of his wineglass, something calculating in his gaze. His loss, he said simply, and the conversation moved on. After dinner, Matteo's medication made him drowsy. I checked his temperature, 99. 4, much improved, and found myself automatically tucking him into bed in his enormous bedroom, decorated with a tasteful space theme that reminded me he was, despite everything, just a child. Will you read to me like you promised? He asked sleepily, pointing to a bookshelf filled with children's classics. I selected a well-worn copy of The Little Prince and sat in the chair beside his bed. As I read, I was acutely aware of Russo leaning against the doorframe, watching us with an intensity that made my skin prickle. 3 chapters in, Matteo was sound asleep. I quietly closed the book and rose, careful not to wake him. You're good with him, Russo said as I joined him at the door. Not a question, but an assessment. He's a special child. This at least was easy truth. Very observant. Too observant sometimes. He gestured for me to follow him down the hall. He sees too much. Feels too much. Like his father, I thought, but didn't say. We ended up in a study lined with books and dominated by a massive desk. Rain continued to lash against the windows, the storm showing no signs of abating. One wall was covered with security monitors showing different areas of the property. Another held a bar with crystal decanters. Drink? He offered, already pouring amber liquid into a glass. No, thank you. I remained standing, suddenly aware of how alone we were. Mr. Russo, I should check on Matteo again before. Dr. Brennan is monitoring him, he interrupted, settling into a leather armchair and indicating I should take the one opposite. And call me Antonio. You've earned that much. It didn't feel like a request. I sat, perching on the edge of the chair, hands folded in my lap. Emma Harper. He said my name slowly, as if tasting it. Graduated with honors from St. Michael's College of Nursing. Worked 5 years at Memorial Hospital in the pediatric intensive care unit. Then suddenly switched to school nursing 3 years ago. He took a sip of his drink. Why? My blood turned to ice. How do you know this? His smile was cold. I make it my business to know everything about the people who come into contact with my son, especially those who show unusual interest in him. I was just doing my job, I said, hating the tremor in my voice. With exceptional care, he acknowledged. The question is why a nurse with your qualifications is working at an underfunded public school for a fraction of what you could earn elsewhere. I swallowed hard. As I said at dinner, I prefer working with children in schools now. His dark eyes never left mine. After what happened at Memorial, I understand why. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What do you know about that? Everything. He set down his glass. The malpractice suit. The patient you couldn't save. The husband who blamed you and walked out. The settlement that nearly bankrupted you. Each word was a knife. Memories flooded back. The monitors screaming as little Lily Tavish flatlined, her father's anguished face, the months of depositions and accusations, Mark packing his bags and telling me he couldn't live with my failure, the whispers in the hospital hallways, the panic attacks that still woke me in the night. That information is private, I whispered. Nothing is private from me, Emma. The way he said my name sent an involuntary shiver through me. Not in this city. Why are you doing this? I demanded, anger finally breaking through my fear. Is this how you thank someone who helped your son? Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. I'm doing this because I need to understand you. You're now involved with my family. Involved? I'm a school nurse who happened to be there when Mateo needed help. Once he's recovered, I'll go back to my life, and you'll go back to whatever it is you do. I didn't dare name his activities aloud. Russo leaned forward, the movement somehow predatory. Your life and mine are now connected, Emma. Accepting that will make things easier. Fear clawed at my throat. Are you threatening me? No. His voice softened. I'm offering you protection. Protection? From what? From whom? He corrected. Mateo's mother's family, the Calabreses. The name struck a chord. Even I knew of the Calabrese crime family, rivals of the Russos in a generations-long blood feud. What do they have to do with me? Russo stood, moving to pour another drink. The rain cast moving shadows across his face. Mateo's mother, Sofia, was a Calabrese. Our marriage was supposed to bring peace. His laugh was bitter. Instead, it brought more war. When she died giving birth to Mateo, her family blamed me. They've been trying to take him ever since. The revelation stunned me. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? They have people everywhere. Teachers, doctors, social workers, all looking for any excuse to claim I'm an unfit father. His knuckles whitened around his glass. They've tried to plant evidence of abuse, tried to bribe his previous school to report neglect. I remembered Mateo's school file, the multiple transfers, the sparse medical information. When you called about Mateo today, my first thought was that it was another of their tricks. His eyes met mine, haunted, but it wasn't. It was just a dedicated nurse who cared about a sick child. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Any nurse would have done the same. No. His certainty was absolute. Most would have waited for the ambulance. You called me directly, against what must have been your better judgment. He wasn't wrong. Every instinct had told me not to get involved with the Russos. The Calabreses will have noticed, he continued. They'll know a new player has entered the game. Someone close to both Mateo and me. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I'm not a player in any game. You are now. He moved closer, towering over me. Whether you chose it or not. This is insane. I stood, needing to put distance between us. I'm a school nurse, a nobody. Tomorrow, I'll go back to my apartment and... Your apartment on Deerfield Avenue? The casual mention of my address made my blood freeze. The one with the broken security lock on the main entrance? The one 20 minutes from Calabrese territory? My legs weakened, and I gripped the back of the chair for support. You're scaring me. Something like regret crossed his face. That's not my intention, but you need to understand the reality of your situation. He moved to the security monitors, tapping one. These are the cameras around your apartment building, installed 3 hours ago. The screen showed the familiar facade of my shabby building. Another tap switched to the hallway outside my apartment, the stairwell, the back exit. You're having me watched. Outrage momentarily overpowered fear. I'm having you protected, he corrected. Until I'm certain the Calabreses don't see you as leverage against me. The implications spun in my mind like a terrible kaleidoscope. How long? He shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual. Until I'm satisfied you're safe. And if I refuse this protection? His expression hardened. That would be unwise. We stared at each other across the room, the storm outside mirroring the turbulence within me. I was trapped, not just by the weather, but by forces I couldn't control or fully understand. I should check on Mateo, I said finally, needing escape. Russo nodded once, allowing me this small retreat. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. Emma. The way he said my name was different now, almost gentle. I'm not the monster they say I am. Not to those under my protection. I didn't turn around. But you are a monster to someone, aren't you? His silence was answer enough. Matteo was sleeping peacefully, his fever nearly gone. I sat beside his bed, watching his chest rise and fall, trying to reconcile the innocent child with the web of violence and power that surrounded him. How different his life was from those of the other children I treated at St. Catherine's, with their simple worries about homework and playground games. I must have fallen asleep in the chair, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through a gap in the curtains, and Matteo was sitting up in bed, watching me with curious eyes. You stayed all night, he said, sounding pleased. I straightened, wincing at the crick in my neck. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm better now. His smile was disarmingly sweet. Papa said you might stay for a few days to make sure I don't get sick again. My heart sank. So Russo had already decided my immediate future. We'll see, I said noncommittally. I hope you do, Matteo said earnestly. I like having you here. It's mostly just grown-ups who work for Papa. No one who reads stories. The naked loneliness in his words made my throat tight. What about your friends from school? His small shoulders lifted in a shrug. We move a lot. And Papa says I can't have friends over because of security. The isolation of his existence struck me with painful clarity. No mother. No friends. Just a father who, whatever his devotion, lived in a world of violence and enemies. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Sophia entered with a breakfast tray and a small suitcase that I recognized with shock as my own. Mr. Russo had some of your things brought from your apartment, she explained, setting down the tray. He thought you might be more comfortable with your own clothes. The violation of my privacy sent anger coursing through me. He had someone go through my things? Sophia's expression remained carefully neutral. Mr. Russo thought of your comfort. Did he? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Miss Harper is mad, Matteo observed, his perception uncanny, because Papa didn't ask first. Despite my anger, I had to smile at his understanding. That's right, Matteo. People should ask before taking other people's things. Even Papa? He asked, genuinely curious. Especially people like your Papa, I said, then immediately worried I'd gone too far. But Matteo just nodded thoughtfully. I'll tell him that. After breakfast, Dr. Brennan returned to examine Matteo, pronouncing him much improved, but still in need of rest. Throughout the examination, I found myself automatically noting the doctor's procedures, mentally comparing them to what I would have done. When I made a suggestion about adjusting the antibiotic dosage based on Matteo's weight, Brennan looked surprised but incorporated the change. You have a good eye, he commented as we stepped outside Matteo's room. Antonio mentioned you worked in pediatric intensive care. The reminder of Russo's investigation into my past made me tense. Yes, several years ago. Brennan studied me over his glasses. A waste of talent, if you don't mind my saying so. School nursing is important, but with your skills, he trailed off, then lowered his voice. Antonio doesn't bring people into this house lightly, Miss Harper. Whatever your relationship, there is no relationship, I interrupted sharply. I helped his son, that's all. His skeptical expression said he didn't believe me. Nevertheless, he values your medical opinion. That's unprecedented. Before I could respond, the man in question appeared at the end of the hallway, his presence immediately dominating the space. Today he wore a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his dark hair slicked back to reveal the strong lines of his face. How is he? Russo asked, approaching us. Much improved, Dr. Brennan reported. Miss Harper suggested an adjustment to his medication that I believe will help prevent any recurrence of symptoms. Russo's eyes found mine, something like admiration in them. I'm not surprised. Emma has good instincts. The familiarity of his tone, the use of my first name in front of others. It created an impression of intimacy that didn't exist. Or did it? The boundaries between captor and guest, between professional obligation and personal involvement, seemed increasingly blurred. I need to speak with you, I said, finding courage I didn't know I possessed, privately. If my directness surprised him, he didn't show it. Of course, my study in 10 minutes. It wasn't a request. 10 minutes felt both too long and not nearly enough time to prepare what I needed to say. I paced the hallway outside Rousseau's study, rehearsing arguments that sounded increasingly hollow, even to my own ears. How does one negotiate with a man who simply takes what he wants? When I finally knocked, his deep voice immediately called for me to enter. The study looked different in daylight. Less intimidating, but no less a reflection of its owner's power. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. Antonio sat not behind his imposing desk, but in one of the leather chairs, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He looked up as I entered, removing his glasses in a gesture that somehow made him appear more human, more approachable. It had to be deliberate. "You slept in Mateo's room," he said, setting aside his papers. Not a question. I was concerned about his fever returning. I remained standing, arms crossed. "Mr. Rousseau." "Antonio," he corrected. "Mr. Rousseau," I repeated firmly. "We need to establish some boundaries. Having my personal belongings brought here without my consent is unacceptable. Having cameras installed at my apartment is an invasion of privacy. I appreciate your concern for your son, but the situation has gone too far." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Are you finished?" The calm question deflated some of my righteous anger. "Yes." "Sit, please." He gestured to the chair opposite his. When I hesitated, he added, "It's difficult to have a meaningful conversation when you're standing over me like an avenging angel." The unexpected imagery caught me off guard. I sat, still maintaining a rigid posture. "First," he began, his voice measured, "you're right about your belongings. I should have asked. It won't happen again." The admission surprised me. "Thank you." "Second, the cameras are non-negotiable. The Calabreses have already made inquiries about you." Fear crawled up my spine. "What kind of inquiries?" "The dangerous kind." His jaw tightened. 3 of their men were seen near St. Catherine's this morning. Another 2 drove past your apartment building. My mouth went dry. "That doesn't make any sense. Why would they care about me?" "Because I brought you here," he said simply. "Into my home. With my son. That makes you significant in their eyes. But I'm not. It doesn't matter what you are. It matters what they believe you are." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "The Calabreses have been trying to take Mateo from me since he was born. They've used every tactic. Legal challenges, bribed officials, even attempted kidnappings." "Kidnappings?" The word came out as a horrified whisper. Antonio's expression darkened. "Twice. Both times my security prevented it. The second attempt left 3 of their men dead and 1 of mine. The casual reference to murder should have repulsed me. Instead, I found myself thinking of Mateo's sweet face, his excitement about making volcanoes in science class. The idea of someone trying to snatch him made something protective and fierce rise within me. After the second attempt," Antonio continued, "I moved Mateo to St. Catherine's. It's small, overlooked. I donated anonymously to upgrade their security systems, placed 2 of my men as maintenance workers." I blinked in surprise. I had no idea. That was the point. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Everything was working perfectly until yesterday. When Mateo collapsed," I said softly, understanding dawning. Antonio nodded. "When you called me, I had to make a split-second decision, bring you into my world, or risk my son's health with strangers." His dark eyes held mine. I chose my son. The vulnerability in his admission disarmed me. Whatever else Antonio Rousseau might be, his love for Mateo was real and fierce. "I understand wanting to protect him," I said carefully. "But I still don't see why I need to stay here. Mateo is recovering well. Dr. Brennan is monitoring him. My presence isn't medically necessary anymore." "It's not about medical necessity now." He stood, moving to pour coffee from a silver carafe on his desk. He offered me a cup, which I accepted automatically. "It's about what you've become in this equation." "And what's that?" I asked, wrapping my fingers around the warm porcelain. He resumed his seat, regarding me over the rim of his cup. A wild card. Someone who's now connected to both Mateo and me, but not controlled by either family. Someone who acted out of genuine concern rather than obligation or fear. I frowned. So I'm what? A pawn in your family feud? No. His voice hardened. You're under my protection, which means you're a target for my enemies. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. For how long? Until I eliminate the threat. The casual way he referenced what could only mean violence sent a chill through me. This was the reality of who he was. A man who eliminated threats as easily as others might discuss the weather. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Abandon my job? My life? Your job is waiting for you. The school principal has been informed you're taking personal leave. As for your life, his eyes never left mine. Consider this an unexpected detour. Anger flared again. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Planned every detail without any consideration for what I might want? I've considered your safety, he countered. Which is apparently more than you have. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said with exaggerated patience, that you live alone in an apartment with broken security locks, in a neighborhood with the highest crime rate in the city. It means you drive a car that breaks down twice a month with no alarm system. It means you take the same route to work every day, stop at the same coffee shop, and have no one who would notice if you disappeared for days. Each word felt like a slap, not because they weren't true, but because they were. My life since the divorce had been a lonely, mechanical existence. Work, home, repeat. No close friends, no family nearby. Just me and my ghosts. How do you know all this? I whispered. I make it my business to know everything about people who enter my life. I didn't enter your life, I protested. I was dragged into it. Something like regret flickered across his face. Perhaps. But we're here now. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of Antonio's men entered, his expression grave. Sir, there's a situation at the gates. Calabresi's men are demanding to speak with you. Antonio was on his feet instantly, all traces of the contemplative man gone. How many? 4 cars. At least 12 men. Alert the security team. Full protocol. He turned to me, his voice brooking no argument. Go to Mateo. Stay with him until I come for you. Fear clutched at my throat. What's happening? Nothing I can't handle. His face softened fractionally. Just keep my son safe. Please. The please struck me as oddly vulnerable amid the sudden tension. I nodded and hurried from the study, making my way to Mateo's room where I found him playing a video game, blissfully unaware of any danger. Miss Harper, he exclaimed, his face lighting up. Want to play Mario Kart with me? I forced a smile, trying to hide my anxiety. Sure, sweetheart. But first, let me check your temperature. As I placed the thermometer in his ear, I glanced out his window. From this angle, I could see the main gates at the far end of the property. 4 black cars were parked just outside, surrounded by men in dark suits. More of Antonio's security personnel had taken up positions along the driveway, their stances alert. 98.6, I announced, relieved that at least Mateo's health was improving. Perfect. Does that mean I can go back to school tomorrow? He asked hopefully. My heart clenched. Let's see what your dad and Dr. Brennan say, okay? For now, show me how this game works. I sat beside him on his bed, controller in hand, trying to focus on the colorful racing game, while my mind spun with worry. What was happening at the gates? Were we in danger? The contrast between the cheerful music from the game and the tension I'd witnessed was surreal. An hour passed, then 2. Mateo beat me handily at every race, his delight at having someone to play with overriding any competitive frustration on my part. When lunch was delivered by a silent Sophia, I noticed more security personnel in the hallways. Why are there so many of Papa's men today? Mateo asked, his perception once again catching me off guard. I'm not sure, I said, not wanting to lie but unwilling to frighten him. He shrugged, biting into his sandwich. Probably because of Uncle Vincent. I froze. Uncle Vincent? My mama's brother, Mateo explained matter-of-factly. He comes sometimes to try to make Papa angry. They hate each other. The casual way he described what must be dangerous confrontations between rival crime families broke my heart. This was his normal. "Have you met your Uncle Vincent?" I asked carefully. Matteo shook his head. "Papa doesn't let him near me. He says Uncle Vincent would try to take me away." "And how would you feel about that?" I couldn't help asking. His small face grew serious. "I don't want to leave Papa. Uncle Vincent scares me. You've seen him?" "In pictures. He has cold eyes," he demonstrated by making his own eyes wide and unblinking. "Not like Papa's. Papa has angry eyes sometimes, but not cold ones." The child's astute observation gave me pause. I'd seen that same quality in Antonio's eyes. Heat rather than ice, even in anger. Passion rather than calculation. A commotion in the hallway drew my attention. Raised voices, footsteps, the sound of something breaking. Matteo's eyes widened in alarm. "It's okay," I assured him, though I had no idea if that was true. "Let's keep playing your game." Before he could respond, the door burst open. Antonio stood there, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with what looked horribly like blood. Behind him, 2 of his men had their weapons drawn. "Emma, take Matteo to the panic room. Now." His voice was deadly calm, which somehow frightened me more than if he'd been shouting. I was on my feet instantly. "Are you hurt?" "Not my blood." The flat statement chilled me. "Sophia will show you the way." As if on cue, Sophia appeared, her normally composed face tight with fear. "This way, quickly." I grabbed Matteo's hand, but he pulled away, running to his father. "Papa, what's happening?" Antonio knelt down, placing his hands on his son's shoulders. The tenderness in the gesture contrasted sharply with the blood on his shirt. "Remember what we practiced, Piccolo. When I say it's time for the special room, you go without questions. It's just a precaution." Matteo nodded solemnly, though fear lingered in his eyes. "Like a fire drill." "Exactly." Antonio looked up at me. "Take care of him." The weight of his trust settled on my shoulders like a physical thing. I nodded, taking Matteo's hand again. Sophia led us through a series of hallways I hadn't seen before, eventually stopping at what appeared to be a blank wall. She pressed her palm against a hidden scanner, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a steel-reinforced door. "Inside," she urged, already turning back. "The system will seal automatically. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Russo or Marco." The panic room was surprisingly comfortable, a windowless space with couches, a bathroom, a small kitchenette, and multiple screens showing security feeds from around the property. I gasped as one of the screens showed the front gates, where 2 of the black cars were now in flames. "It's okay, Miss Harper," Matteo said with eerie calmness, taking my hand. "This happens sometimes." His acceptance of such violence as routine made my chest ache. "Matteo, this shouldn't be happening, not around you." He looked up at me with those wise eyes that seemed to belong to someone much older. "Papa says our family is different, that he has to do hard things to keep me safe." I sank onto one of the couches, pulling him gently down beside me. "Do you understand what that means?" He nodded slowly. "Papa hurts bad people who want to hurt us. Like Uncle Vincent's men." There was no way to shield him from a truth he already knew. Instead, I wrapped my arm around his small shoulders. "Are you scared?" "A little," he admitted, "but Papa always wins. Always wins." The child's absolute faith in his father's invincibility was both touching and terrifying. What would happen when that faith was inevitably broken? On the security screens, I watched as Antonio's men moved with military precision, securing the perimeter. Antonio himself was visible on one screen, speaking intensely with a man I didn't recognize. Both had their hands on their weapons. Then, suddenly, the other man backed away, returning to the single car that remained. Within minutes, they had driven off, leaving the burning wrecks of the other vehicles behind. "See?" Matteo said, relief evident in his voice. "They're leaving." An hour passed before the panic room door finally opened. Antonio stood there, now wearing a fresh shirt, all evidence of the confrontation erased, except for a small cut above his left eyebrow. "It's all clear," he said, his eyes immediately finding mine, searching for what? Judgment? Fear? "The situation has been resolved." Matteo ran to him, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. Antonio's large hand came to rest on his son's head, the tenderness of the gesture at odds with what I'd just witnessed on the security screens. "Are you okay, Papa?" Matteo asked, looking up at the cut on his father's face. "It's nothing, Piccolo," Antonio assured him. "Just a scratch." His eyes met mine over Matteo's head, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Vulnerability. Not weakness, but the knowledge that I had seen behind the curtain of his world and might now view him differently. Might view him as the monster I had accused him of being. And strangely, terrifyingly, I didn't. That night, after Matteo had finally fallen asleep, I stood on the balcony of my guest room, watching distant lightning flash over the bay. The storm had passed, but another seemed to be brewing on the horizon. A fitting metaphor for my situation. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I knew who it was before I opened it. Antonio stood in the hallway, his imposing frame silhouetted against the dim light. He'd changed into a simple black t-shirt and pants, the casual attire somehow making him appear more dangerous rather than less. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned, but not bandaged. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low. Every instinct told me to refuse, to maintain whatever boundaries still existed between us. Instead, I stepped aside. He entered the room but remained near the door, respecting my space in a way that surprised me. In his hand was a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. He didn't offer me one this time. "Matteo is sleeping peacefully," he said. "No fever." "That's good." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware I was wearing only the silk pajamas Sophia had provided. "The antivirals are working," he nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "You have questions about what happened today." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "Vincent Calabresi came to deliver a message," he said, moving to stand by the balcony doors, looking out at the same storm I'd been watching. "He knows about you now." Fear crawled up my spine. What does that mean? "It means you were right to be concerned." He turned to face me, his expression grave. "The situation is more complicated than I initially thought. Because of me?" "Because Vincent is desperate." Antonio's jaw tightened. "He's losing control of his family's operations. His father is dying, and the succession isn't assured. He needs leverage against me to maintain his position. And I'm that leverage?" The idea seemed absurd. "I'm nothing to you." Something flickered in his dark eyes. "That's not how Vincent sees it. He believes I've replaced his sister." The implication struck me like a physical blow. "That's ridiculous. I'm only here because of Matteo's health." Perception creates reality in our world. Antonio set his glass down on a nearby table. "Vincent believes I've taken an interest in you beyond professional courtesy." "Have you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Antonio's gaze intensified. "Would it matter if I had?" My heart stuttered in my chest. "I don't know." The honest answer seemed to surprise him. He moved closer, his proximity sending warmth cascading through me despite my apprehension. "When I saw you with Matteo that first day," he said softly, "reading to him, caring for him without fear or agenda, it was like watching something I'd forgotten existed. Basic human decency, I suggested, trying to lighten the suddenly charged atmosphere." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Genuine care. Most people in my life want something from me. Money, power, protection. You just wanted to help my son, and that's my job," I reminded him, though we both knew it had become more than that. "Your job ended when the school day did." His eyes searched mine. "Yet here you are, 3 days later." 3 days. It felt simultaneously like 3 hours and 3 years. How had my life changed so completely in such a short time? "Not by choice," I pointed out. "At first, no," he acknowledged. "But you could have refused to help once you were here. Could have demanded to leave despite the danger. Instead, you stayed, protected my son, comforted him." He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that made my senses swim. Close enough to see the faint stubble along his jaw, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of burdens I couldn't imagine. "Antonio," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, What happens now? His expression softened. That depends on you. On me? I laughed without humor. Nothing that's happened has been my choice. This is. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The simple touch sent electricity coursing through me. What happens next is entirely your decision. I should have stepped back, should have maintained the professional distance I'd clung to since arriving. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch. I'm afraid, I admitted. Of me? The question held genuine concern. I shook my head. Of this. Whatever this is. It doesn't make sense. Some things aren't meant to make sense, Emma. The way he said my name made my knees weak. They're meant to be felt. When his lips finally met mine, it was with unexpected gentleness. A question, not a demand. I answered by wrapping my arms around his neck, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. His strong hand spanned my waist, lifting me effortlessly until my feet no longer touched the ground. We moved as one toward the bed, all rational thought suspended in the heat between us. This was madness. I knew it even as I surrendered to it. This man was dangerous, powerful, everything I should be running from. Yet in that moment, all I could think about was the feel of his skin beneath my fingers, the sound of my name on his lips, the safety I paradoxically felt in his arms. Hours later, I lay with my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, occasionally venturing into my hair. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. I never meant for this to happen, I said finally, voicing the thought that had been circling in my mind. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. Neither did I. I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. In the dim light, with his guard down, he looked almost peaceful, almost normal. What happens in the morning? His expression grew serious. We face reality. And what reality is that? He cupped my face with his hand, thumb brushing my cheek. That your life has changed. That my enemies now see you as a path to me. Fear returned, cutting through the warm haze of intimacy. I can't live like this, Antonio. Looking over my shoulder, hiding in panic rooms. That's not me. I know. His voice held resignation, which is why I've made arrangements. I stiffened. What kind of arrangements? He sat up, reaching for my hands. I have a house in Monterey. Private, secure, but not a fortress like this. Mateo has always loved it there. The ocean, the space to run and play without constant guards. He could attend a good school nearby. You're sending him away? I asked, confused. I'm sending us away, he corrected gently. You, me, Mateo, a fresh start. Away from the Calabreses, away from all of this. The proposal stunned me. You would leave your business? Your empire? I would leave it in capable hands, he said, his eyes never leaving mine, for a chance at something I never thought possible. What's that? A family. The vulnerability in those two words nearly broke me. A real one. Not built on fear or obligation. I pulled back slightly, needing to think clearly. This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know enough, he said with quiet certainty. I know you're brave and compassionate. I know you put others before yourself. I know my son adores you, and He paused, seeming to search for words. I see a future when I look at you. One I never believed I could have. My mind raced with the impossibility of what he was suggesting. What about my job? My life here? Your job at a school that underpays you? Your empty apartment? The life you built to punish yourself for something that wasn't your fault? His direct questions cut to the heart of truths I'd been avoiding. Tell me honestly, Emma, what would you really be leaving behind? Tears stung my eyes because he was right. Since the malpractice suit, since Mark left, I'd been existing, not living. Going through motions, isolating myself as some form of penance for a mistake that, deep down, I knew wasn't truly mine to bear. It's not that simple, I whispered. It can be. He brought my hand to his lips. Say yes. Come with us. Not as Mateo's nurse, but as what? I asked when he hesitated. His eyes held mine. As whatever you want to be, partner, friend, eventually perhaps more. but the choice will always be yours. Dawn was breaking outside, golden light spilling through the balcony doors. A new day, offering a new beginning, if I was brave enough to take it. I need time, I said finally. This is all happening so fast. He nodded, acceptance in his eyes. Of course. But not too much time. We leave in 3 days. As if on cue, a soft knock sounded at the door. Antonio was on his feet instantly, pulling on his pants with efficient movements. I clutched the sheet to my chest, heart pounding. "Papa?" Mateo's voice called. "Are you in Miss Harper's room? I can't find you." Antonio and I exchanged a look, part guilt, part amusement. "Just a minute, Piccolo," he called, finishing dressing with remarkable speed. He came to the bed, leaning down to kiss me quickly. "Think about it," he whispered. Then, with a final lingering look, he went to the door, opening it just enough to slip through. I heard Mateo's excited voice in the hallway. "Papa, Dr. Brennan says I'm all better. Can Miss Harper and I make pancakes for breakfast?" "That depends on if Miss Harper wants pancakes," Antonio replied, his voice fading as they moved down the hallway. Alone, I fell back against the pillows, my mind whirling. 3 days to decide. 3 days to choose between returning to my safe, empty life, or diving into the unknown with a man whose world was dangerous, but whose heart, against all odds, seemed true. The next 2 days passed in a blur of domestic moments that felt surreal in their normality. Mateo and I did make pancakes, a messy, laughter-filled process that left flour handprints on every surface. Antonio joined us for meals, board games, even a movie night where Mateo fell asleep between us, his small head resting trustingly against my shoulder. No more incidents occurred at the gates. No more panic rooms or blood-stained shirts. Just 3 people existing in a bubble that I knew couldn't last. On the evening of the second day, I found Antonio in his study, finalizing arrangements for our potential departure. Watching him work, focused, efficient, occasionally smiling at something on his phone that Mateo had sent him. I realized I'd made my decision. "I'll come with you," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. He looked up, hope and caution warring in his expression. "You're certain?" I nodded, crossing the room to stand before him. Not about everything. Not about us. That's still evolving. But about leaving. About Monterey. About Mateo needing stability and safety. I took a deep breath. And about deserving a fresh start myself. The smile that transformed his face made my heart skip. He rose, pulling me into an embrace that felt like coming home. "You won't regret this," he murmured against my hair. "I might," I said honestly. "This could be the biggest mistake of my life." He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. "Or the moment your life truly began." The next morning, we left before dawn. 2 SUVs, minimal security, Mateo chattering excitedly about the sea otters we might see in Monterey Bay. As we drove away from the mansion, I watched Antonio's profile, strong and determined in the growing light. He must have felt my gaze because he reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. "Second thoughts?" he asked quietly, while Mateo was distracted by a game on his tablet. 1,000, I admitted. But also hope. I haven't felt that in a long time. His grip tightened. "I will keep you both safe, that's a promise." "I know." And surprisingly, I did know. Whatever Antonio Russo had been, whatever parts of his past remained shrouded in darkness, the man beside me now was one who would protect what he loved with everything he had. As we crested the hill overlooking the bay, the sun broke fully over the horizon, bathing everything in golden light. Ahead lay an uncertain future, but for the first time in years, I was moving towards something rather than away. One phone call had changed everything, a desperate moment that had somehow led to hope. I looked back once at the city receding behind us. My old life was there, safe but hollow. Ahead was risk, uncertainty, but also possibility. Mateo's laughter filled the car as Antonio pointed out a pod of dolphins in the distance. I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder as we drove toward our new beginning. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the greatest healing. Sometimes one call changes everything.